Okay, so I want to talk to you about knowing what you're doing as an artist and how do you get there. Uh, it's a complicated thing and it has to do with creative process and it has to do with checking in with yourself and confidence and all of these things. But for me, the key has always been the sketchbook. And this is kind of a boring answer in one respect because a lot of the artist's frustration happens the the moment when you're looking at a blank sketchbook. And when you're staring at the blank page, it's super difficult to know exactly, okay, where do I start? And this is kind of the magic of the artist's sketchbook. We have this habit of thinking that we need to do something brilliant and we're looking for a breakthrough, but really the showing up and the hard work is where it really happens. And so I think the thing to keep in mind is that when you show up to work, you have to have not so much a plan, but a series of habits. And you want those habits to make your job easier. All right. So again, some of these sketchbooks, I've been setting up my creative suite to import different images from my sketchbooks, from photos from life. The Creative Suite allows you to grab and use the technology of the book, which is powerful, and I'll get to that in a second. But for example, here, I'm learning salsa. This is just a daily life thing. I had a foot injury, and I thought, okay, let's roll with this literally, and let's learn how to dance. And yeah, I would be able to dance a little bit, but I couldn't dance more than a couple. And so I would watch, I would practice, and then it occurred to me, well, why am I not drawing these? Now, these are not great drawings, but they're done fast. And eventually, you get to these moments where moving quickly, you capture something really beautiful, even though the drawing quality, proportion, and so on is a bit garbage. But that's not the point. What you capture when you're thinking fast is often superior to quote unquote getting it right. And so there are plenty of times when you want to make it look beautiful. But if you look at J.M.W. Turner, he used to go from the winter painting all year, but then in the summer, he would take these little sketchbooks and he would go to the beach and wander around, sort of the kind of thing Walt Whitman used to do, actually. And he would take, let's see, where's that? Yeah, here's the actual book. This is what's called a facsimile sketchbook. It is a copy page by page. What is here's the inside, a nice marbling effect, right? And here you can see who made it. And look, this is what he would record to capture the ambiance. And if you've seen Turner's works, I mean, these are exquisite, extraordinary, dark paintings of sea battles and with ships, but he's not capturing that. He's out there capturing the ambiance. What's the flow that he's looking for, and the vibe and the energy. So these little, here's possibly a sail, hard to say, but these brushstrokes were enough to trigger the memory. And in many ways, that's what a sketchbook is a series of memory triggers. You're arranging a lot of momentary thoughts. So you get here's one with that actual ship. But you can see he's like already got this sort of like misty, cloudy, dramatic landscape. And when you stand in front of one of these giant paintings, and it's funny to think that he's painting these in the dark in the winter, he's got the ideas all laid out. And this is the power of a sequential book. A book organizes things into pages. Now, I've introduced with my Creative Suite a way to do it digitally. Wow, is that more cool? But like when you're planning something like this, I want to have complex ideas. So we got the idea of nature and the idea of our urban environment and how nature conquers it. And then we'll do sunflowers are just cheerful. but they also look like aliens when they start to unfold. So I became really fascinated with sunflowers as more complex objects, but also the math of the center, the way the seeds are arranged. It's Fibonacci. So it goes according to 1.618 and 0.618. These are the numbers of phi, and this is the math of the arrangement. And of course, time is base 60, goes all the way back to the Babylonians and probably earlier. So, this Mesopotamian time schedule and the idea of the mechanism of a clock and how clocks organize our time, just as cities organize our time, and yet nature is pervasive, and what's the relationship? All right, so this is just a sketch with an X-Acto knife involved, which, let me tell you, is a pain in the butt. So organizing where the holes go, I'm going to import this into my sketchbook app, and I'm going to be able to plan page by page, and I don't have to know what I'm doing ahead of time. I hash it out in the sketchbook and figure it out as I go. And that discovery process is the moment when the real stuff gets in. Leonard Cohen says, the cracks, that's where the light gets in. And he's, as Leonard Cohen usually is, he's not only right about it, he's beautiful about it. And he talks about this kind of thing. Can you still enter the inspiration when you play the song? Is the inspiration still available? And this is what happens when you have a craft. And this is the mastery that by looking at and really spending time in the heads of the master artist, that you get to do some really cool things. In a later video, I want to talk about these. This is just a couple of studies. I'm using Picasso's process and writing extensive notes about it. But how do you conceptually plan a series of artworks so that you can really think through what you're up to? And here's me playing with the idea of clocks and time and quick thumbnail drawings. These are all tools and techniques that you're not often taught because your art teacher, phenomenally well trained, they've got years and years of experience, but what they don't have is the time to be both your college counselor and your mentor and your mindset coach. And kind of that's where I fit in, is where is the thinking that helps you structure your mindsets and your approach, how do you treat your creative process as an art form in itself? All right, so I'm gonna probably a terrible production value decision, but I'm going to show you my app. What the app does is it allows you to take this format of a regular book, which again is a super powerful tool. Here's the Creative Suite. Let's go to the sketchbook. We'll deal with the sketchbook mostly today. And, you have your sequential pages. This is just sort of my mercenary sketchbook for the moment. I'm doing a series of articles and I'm doing the illustrations. So I'm kind of working these things out. And yes, it has sort of like Procreate and Photoshop toggle. All right, so now we're in the layer editor, and you can see it's just a regular layer editor. And I have lots of drawing tools, but I made my own drawing tools. And so I usually use the ink brush, which gives you kind of sumi or Chinese brush painted lines. I did a lot of sumi painting at one phase of my life. And then you've got the airbrush tool and so on. But the point is not that, for this discussion, that you should use specific tools, but I use a limited set of tools because I like to focus on what's my strategy, what am I really after here, and that is the core of what I'm trying to offer people, which is, how do you think? How do you know what you want? How do you know what you're going to do today? Well, that has to be, which sketchbook am I looking for? I am looking for, okay. Let's see if this is the right one. All right, so I've created these learning sketchbooks. These are, you can pick these up on my Stan.store, and you can actually interactively work and copy, but get in the head of Hokusai and learn how to make life observations, decisive brushstrokes, because ink on paper is you have to decide. A lot of people like pencil because you don't have to decide, but there's a power to making that decision. And these are the kinds of lessons that I teach you. Dynamic compositions. Anyway, so you do these lessons, and let's add a page. So now you've got a fresh page to draw on to do the lessons. And I'm not going to do much drawing, but just to show you, I guess I need the pencil for that. Sorry, I'm multitasking. So got all these tiles here in Spain. All right, terrible drawing, but that's not the point. I'm multitasking, and this is just the proof of concept of what I was trying to explain to you, is that if you have a process, and if you're just recording ideas, then you can pop in, create a new layer, and now I'm just going to switch ink so you can see the difference. Now I've got my visual idea. I copy the parts that I want, and I get rid of the initial idea, at least for right now. All right, so you get the idea. You can actually remove the object. All right, let's go back to, where was I going with this? Right, so when you develop these ideas, you can then go ahead and organize your ideas, digitize your sketchbooks, and then annotate right over the top of it. But again, the point that I'm trying to make here, and the message I want you to take away, is that when, as artists, we know what we want to do. The example in the beginning of the video where I'm talking about you can hear they're working on the street right now. This is not the forest. I'm in the center of town, but stepping outside very quickly, even within most city centers, you've got fields where the tree roots of the volunteer trees are breaking through the concrete, and it doesn't take long for nature to dismantle an abandoned city center. And so for me, that's one of the main things that I like to look at, is our nature as animals, and then our social constructed world. They're sort of at odds. And with the environmental crisis, this tension is really deeply rooted, pun intended, I guess, in who we are. And so the very fact that I know this about myself, I know that's a theme that I return to. When I do paintings of water and isolation, I'm playing on the fact that I'm doing that with some of my closest friends. And when I hear the magical cry of a loon, and if you haven't heard one, wow, if you're outside at the last light of the day and you hear that sad, sorrowful cry of an animal who's plunged into darkness without Netflix and many distractions, there's a magic of just hearing that sound echoing around a small lake as you're sitting in a canoe and you're about to paddle back before you lose the light and sit around a fire with old friends. This puts into tension our desire to be in society, to be connected to society, and also removed from it, because green time is healing for us for a reason. I mean, we've evolved to be in the wilds, and yet everything that makes our lives, fun and beautiful comes from that opposition. The fact that deep down, part of us doesn't like being out in dangerous, messy, wet, cold environments. When we think of, happy nature, it's the beach. So, these tensions to me are super interesting. And knowing to leverage that, knowing to dig into my ancestry and think about that. My grandma, I was living in college, I was living in a university housing opportunity that it's out in the middle of the bioreserve. There's an unpaved road, and mountain biking, you got to be careful after a rain because there's channels that dug in. You can get thrown off your bicycle if your wheel goes into one of those things. And they living without heat except for a wood burning stove. You have to chop your own wood. If the wind stops blowing, you got to pump the water. We would harvest food from the org pile where you throw all the vegetable clippings, and then in the fall there's pumpkins and volunteer tomatoes that rich and red, like crunchy as apples. Awesome stuff. And I was so proud to tell my grandmother, who was born in a teenager in the tens and 1920s, and she watched electricity be wired from big spools on ceramic. Most people haven't even seen that version of electricity. So she was there for cars and electrification of houses and plumbing. And she looked at me like I was crazy. I was so proud of myself for studying my classes by candlelight, and the only solar power we had was for the radio, so I had music. And it was, we'd cook dinner together and do the dishes, and all by, one fluorescent bulb powered by the solar panel. And she thought this was the most ridiculous, stupid thing to do. And her entire generation had worked their entire life so no one would have to live that way again. And here I was paying for the experience because I was, it was university housing. And so these perspectives of who we are and the ways that we want to live and what we think are interesting, it's the transition moments. And so for me, that's very much a thing like this. This is me studying transition moments. Where was it? This is me trying to understand dance. This is Turner understanding the tension of the ambiance and the feeling with the specifics that he adds in later. And each of us has our own order and creative process that we like to use, but having all these skills and the habit of employing them, this is where the power is. This is where you take work daily in a sketchbook. Sometimes you're just writing. Sometimes you're just doing a quick sketch, practicing the observation skills, practicing the skill lessons, doing the Hokusai study workbook. You're drawing, you're visually thinking, and while that part of your brain is engaged because your hand's moving and the pencil is recording what you see with your eyes, a different kind of thinking emerges. So this combination of working inside the minds of the masters, you encounter their problems. You learn how to work out those problems in your own way, and it becomes your own process. And I highly recommend apokrino.com, apokrino.com. I'm trevettallen, and this is the kind of thing I like to teach, because even at the best art programs, the teacher doesn't have time to give you this level of mentorship. And then when you get to the university level, the competition starts. And really, this kind of collaborative mindset and digging deep into why you're doing it in the first place, that's where the magic happens. Then you have the perspective and the clarity to engage in much larger pursuits, public art, academic conversations, and you bring to art history a deep appreciation where your mind and your thinking is fully integrated with your art style. So that's my pitch. I think that you'll find that you do your best work with a lot less pain, effort, and struggle when you take the pressure off, use the digital tools in combination with the physical sketchbooks, and I think that's when the magic happens. Because when you're ready, your mind is loose, you're confident, and with the daily practice, you're capable of working really fast and still getting a really high level of quality. And that's something maybe I'll do a video about that later. Post if you think that's interesting. Chinese brush painting teaches you a way to know how to do, say, a bamboo with 3 or 4 brush strokes, and you're 2 strokes, and you've done both sides of the bamboo tree. And yeah, maybe that's interesting. All right. Anyway, thank you for listening. If you made it this far, fantastic. And I appreciate your time, your energy, and thanks for joining me on my creative journey. And I'd love to see what you're doing. All right. Thanks. Stay inspired.